They told me to sleep in a freezing garage on Christmas Eve. What they didn't know is that I secretly own the company that pays their golden child's salary, the very roof over their heads, and an empire worth billions. My name is Crystal, I'm 32 years old, and I am the secret CEO of a tech empire. For years, my family has belittled my career choices, dismissed my ambitions, and treated me like the family disappointment. My hands trembled with silent rage beneath the table. For 5 years, I have hidden my success and endured their mockery. Before I tell you how I went from sleeping in a frozen garage to watching my family's jaws drop, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground. I grew up in suburban Boston in a family that valued traditional markers of success. My parents, Julia and Richard Montgomery, had very specific ideas about what achievement looked like: prestigious universities, conventional career paths, and the external validation that came with them. My older sister, Veronica, now 38, was the golden child who checked every box on their list of expectations. She attended an Ivy League school, got her MBA, and landed a marketing director position at Apex Industries, a well-established tech firm. Every family gathering became a showcase for her accomplishments. My younger brother, Ethan, 28, quickly learned to follow Veronica's blueprint. My parents beamed with pride whenever they spoke about him, their voices warm with approval. Then there was me, stuck in the middle, the square peg they could never hammer into their round hole of expectations. From the time I was 10, I was fascinated by computers and coding. While other kids played video games, I wanted to understand how they worked. My parents viewed this as me playing around, a phase I would outgrow once I discovered real interests. "Crystal, when are you going to join a proper club?" my mother would ask. Colleges look for well-rounded students, not kids who sit in their room all day. High school only widened the gap between my interests and my family's expectations. While Veronica was class president and prom queen, I started a coding club that met in the computer lab during lunch. My unconventional thinking, which teachers praised as innovative, was labeled at home as a lack of focus. "You jump from one project to another," my father complained after I abandoned a half-finished robot to work on a website I was building. "You need to see things through like your sister." I was evolving them, with each project teaching me something I carried into the next. College was supposed to be my turning point. I enrolled in business school to appease my parents, but I simultaneously worked on my startup idea. By my sophomore year, I knew I had something promising: a revolutionary cloud security solution that larger companies were already expressing interest in. When I decided to drop out to pursue it full-time, my family reacted as if I had announced plans to join a cult. "You are throwing your life away," my father said, his disappointment palpable across the dinner table. "We did not raise you to be a quitter. Even if this little project of yours works out, which it won't, what kind of life will that be?" my mother added. "No stability, no benefits, no real career." Veronica, home for the weekend, shook her head with that superior smile I had grown to hate. "Not everyone is cut out for success, Mom." The comparisons became relentless after that. Every family gathering turned into a showcase of Veronica's achievements, juxtaposed against my perceived failures. My parents introduced her with pride at neighborhood functions while awkwardly changing the subject when asked about me. "Veronica just closed a 7-figure marketing deal," my father would tell anyone who would listen. "Crystal is still figuring things out," my mother would say when forced to acknowledge my existence. I had just secured $2 million in seed funding. But when I tried to share the news, Veronica interrupted with an announcement about her promotion to senior director. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother exclaimed, completely forgetting I had been mid-sentence. I would stop seeking their approval. More than that, I would keep my growing success to myself. Someday, when the time was right, they would learn the truth. That night, I founded Nexitech Solutions. Within 2 years, we had offices in 3 cities. By year 3, we had gone international. I built strategic partnerships, acquired smaller companies, and reinvested profits to fuel exponential growth, all while maintaining a modest public persona. As CEO, I made the unconventional choice to remain anonymous in industry circles, operating through trusted executives for public appearances. It was partly a business strategy, allowing us the advantage of being underestimated by competitors, but mostly it was personal. I wasn't ready for my family to know. The emotional toll of living this double life was significant. I owned a penthouse downtown but told my family I rented a studio apartment. I drove a 10-year-old Honda to family functions while my collection of luxury cars stayed in my private garage. I endured questions about when I would get a real job, while running board meetings for a company valued at billions. 5 years after dropping out, I orchestrated our biggest move yet. The acquisition of Apex Industries, the very company where Veronica built her career. Soon, without knowing it, my golden child sister would be working for the family disappointment. I sat at my desk, running my fingers over the embossed logo, now stamped with the Nexitech company, beneath it. 5 years of work had culminated in this moment. The company that had fueled my sister's superiority complex was now mine. I shook my head. Not until after the holidays. Let them enjoy Christmas without worrying about corporate restructuring. The annual invitation from my parents had arrived via text, as perfunctory as ever. No warmth, no excitement at the prospect of seeing me, just logistics. I texted back my acceptance, though every instinct told me to decline. 5 years of conditioning had taught me what to expect. Hours of Veronica's boasting, my parents' thinly veiled disappointment, and Ethan's quiet allegiance to the family hierarchy that placed me firmly at the bottom. Despite owning a fleet of luxury vehicles, I drove my trusty Honda Civic to my parents' suburban home on Christmas Eve. I pulled into the driveway behind an ostentatious Jaguar I didn't recognize. Inside I found my answer. "Crystal, you remember Harold?" Veronica said, though we had never met. She wore a red designer dress that probably cost more than what she thought I earned in a month. "Actually, we haven't had the pleasure," I said, extending my hand. I had deliberately dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, playing my part to perfection. "Crystal, there you are," my mother called from the kitchen doorway. I could use some help with the vegetables. And there it was, the familiar pattern. I silently chopped carrots and peeled potatoes, listening to the laughter from the other room. "So, how's the new corner office, Harold?" my father asked. "Veronica tells us the view of the harbor is spectacular." My ears perked up at this. Technically, I did have a better view from the top floor of the Nexitech Tower downtown. "Have you met this new CEO yet?" my father inquired. "No one has," Veronica interjected. "He's like a ghost, makes all these decisions that upend everything but never shows his face." Her face, I whispered to myself, smiling slightly at the carrot I was chopping. "Crystal, how's that little website thing you were working on?" my father called out, suddenly remembering my existence. "Any luck with it?" I bit my tongue. My little website thing had just acquired Veronica's company for $3 billion. "It's coming along," I answered non-committally. "You know, there's an entry-level marketing position opening up at Apex next quarter," Veronica said, entering the kitchen to refill her wine glass. "Nothing fancy, but it would give you some actual experience." I could put in a word. The condescension in her voice made my jaw clench. "Thanks, but I'm okay with my current situation," I managed. "Suit yourself," she shrugged, returning to the living room. I caught snippets of my parents' conversation as I finished the dinner preparations. "I worry about Crystal, 32 and still chasing internet dreams. Veronica has tried to help her," my father responded. "But you can't help someone who won't help themselves." 5 years of success had insulated me from caring too deeply about their opinions, but some wounds never fully heal. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my CFO about the Apex transition. I smiled despite myself. Harold had no idea that his future at the company was already being decided by the woman chopping vegetables in this kitchen. I had stepped into the hallway to quickly check an urgent email when I overheard Veronica and my mother talking in the guest bedroom. "Your father and I are in our room, Ethan's in his old room, and you'll have yours." "What about Crystal?" Veronica asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Well, the couch in the den is too short, and we're using it to stage the gifts anyway," my mother replied. "I thought the garage would work." "Perfect," Veronica laughed. My blood ran cold. The garage in Boston in December with no heating. 5 years of building an empire while enduring their mockery, and they were banishing me to a freezing garage for Christmas Eve. The dining room gleamed with holiday perfection. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier. It was a scene straight from a Christmas catalog, right down to the assigned seating that placed me at the far end, practically in another time zone from the rest of the conversation. My mother had positioned Harold at the head of the table, with my father at the other end. Veronica mentioned you're interested in the field. Before I could answer, Veronica let out a laugh that she poorly disguised as clearing her throat. Oh, Crystal dabbles in web stuff, she said dismissively. I work in security solutions, I said, meeting Harold's eyes directly. A flash of genuine interest crossed his face. We just acquired a smaller security firm last quarter. What platforms do you specialize in? Harold, Veronica interrupted, placing her hand on his arm. You don't need to talk shop with Crystal. Tell them about the Tokyo expansion instead. And just like that, the conversation was redirected. I watched as Harold hesitated, then followed Veronica's lead, launching into a story about Apex's international growth. My brief moment of professional acknowledgement vanished. The dinner proceeded in its usual pattern. My parents hung on her every word, offering approving nods and proud smiles. Ethan occasionally chimed in with his own achievements, receiving similar validation. When I spoke, which was rarely, my comments were met with polite but disinterested responses before someone quickly changed the subject. It was a dance we had perfected over years of family gatherings. The food is delicious, Julia, Harold said, finishing his second helping of ham. You've outdone yourself. Speaking of which, my father added, we should discuss sleeping arrangements. It's getting late. Here it came. Harold, we've prepared the guest room for you, my mother said. Freshly laundered sheets and towels in the en-suite bathroom. Veronica, you'll have your old room, of course, my father continued. And Ethan's already settled in his. Crystal, my mother began, her voice taking on a falsely bright tone. We've set up the garage for you. There's a camping cot and plenty of blankets. Veronica smirked behind her wine glass, and Ethan suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. The garage isn't heated, I said flatly. You can take one of the space heaters, my father offered, as if this was a generous concession. Harold looked genuinely shocked. The garage? But it's freezing outside. The condescension in her voice made my blood boil. I knew then that she had orchestrated this, bringing Harold specifically to ensure I would be the one displaced. I'm sure we could figure something else out, Harold suggested, looking uncomfortable. It's fine, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. After dinner, I followed my mother to the garage to see my accommodations. In the center was a sagging camping cot with a thin mattress. A pile of mismatched blankets sat at one end, and a small space heater that looked like it was from the 90s stood nearby. You probably won't even notice. I said nothing as she retreated back into the warmth of the house. When the door closed behind her, I sat on the edge of the cot and pulled out my phone. The temperature reading showed 28 degrees. The final details of the Apex acquisition needed my approval before the morning announcement. Why wait until tomorrow? Why not take control of this narrative now? Prepare to send the executive briefing tonight instead of tomorrow morning if you approve. I looked at the time. 8:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve. 5 years of hiding, of enduring their dismissal and disrespect. 5 years of biting my tongue and playing small. Was I really going to let them banish me to a freezing garage on Christmas Eve? The garage door opened and Harold stepped in, looking sheepish. I just wanted to check if you were okay out here. It's really cold. Then again and again. This says Apex has been acquired by Nexitech Solutions, he said, looking up at me. Harold Winters. Yes, I just saw the emails. No, I had no idea. As he listened to the voice on the other end, his eyes widened, and he slowly turned to look at me. May I? With robotic movements he passed me his cell. The moment felt surreal, sitting on a sagging cot in my parents' cluttered garage, about to shatter 5 years of deception. Yes, I'm with Harold now. The timeline has moved up. Proceed with the full announcement to the executive team tonight. Tonight, ma'am? It's Christmas Eve. Some circumstances have changed. You're the CEO of Nexitech, he stated, not a question but a confirmation to himself. The garage, the camping cot, the space heater struggling against the December chill. Sleeping in a garage on Christmas Eve, I finished for him. Harold, did you get the emails? Something's happening with the company. They're saying we've been acquired by. Her voice trailed off as she saw the expression on Harold's face, then followed his gaze to me. Perhaps we should discuss this inside, I suggested, standing up from the cot. It's rather cold out here. The warm air hit my face as we entered the kitchen where my parents and Ethan were cleaning up after dinner. Done settling in already? My mother asked without looking up from the dishes. We need to talk. Something in my voice must have registered, because my mother turned around, dishcloth still in hand. My father looked up from drying a serving platter, and Ethan paused, loading the dishwasher. He glanced at the screen, then at me, clearly unsure what to do. It's probably the CFO with the retention package details. His eyebrows shot up, but he answered the call, putting it on speaker, perhaps without even realizing it. Harold, it's Greg from finance. Have you seen the announcement? Nexitech has acquired us, and the CEO wants immediate meetings with all department heads. They're saying she's been working undercover or something. The kitchen fell completely silent. 5 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Greg, I'll call you back, Harold said faintly, ending the call. Crystal, Veronica began, her voice unusually high. What is he talking about? What do you know about this? I looked around at my family, at the kitchen where I'd spent countless holidays feeling invisible. The moment I had both dreaded and anticipated for 5 years had arrived. I'm the CEO and founder of Nexitech Solutions, I said simply. As of last week, I own Apex Industries. Ethan froze mid-motion, a plate suspended between his hands and the dishwasher. That's not possible. That small startup was Nexitech, I explained. It hasn't been small for quite some time. This is some kind of joke. This is real-time data from our global operations, I explained. Our current valuation is just over 11 billion. Harold had begun nodding slowly, the pieces falling into place. The security innovations, the management restructuring, the focus on cloud infrastructure. That was all you. Every bit of it, I confirmed. But why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, finding her voice at last. You thought I was a failure, I finished for her. We were concerned, my father protested weakly. We wanted security for you. No, I corrected him, years of pent-up emotion finally breaking through. You wanted me to be like Veronica, to follow a path you understood. That's not fair, Veronica interjected. I offered you jobs, connections. Harold winced at this, looking deeply uncomfortable. I would never have agreed to stay if I'd known. My mother stepped forward, her expression shifting to something I rarely saw directed at me. Respect and perhaps a touch of fear. Crystal, sweetheart, if we had known about your company, of course we would have supported you. Don't pretend that you would have treated me differently if you'd known I was rich. The kitchen fell silent again. My phone continued to buzz with notifications as the news spread through the executive ranks at both companies. And me? Am I fired? The question hung in the air. Now it just felt hollow. No, Veronica, you're not fired, I said. Your marketing strategies have been effective, whatever our personal differences. That's up to you, I told her. I've kept my identity private for business reasons, not just personal ones. Where do you live? He asked suddenly. I have a penthouse on the waterfront, I answered, and homes in New York and San Francisco, where our other main offices are located. My mother sank into a kitchen chair, looking overwhelmed. All this time, we had no idea. Harold's phone rang again, and he glanced at me apologetically before stepping into the hallway to take the call. I could hear him talking in his executive voice, suddenly very much the SVP addressing a crisis situation. Veronica stared at me as if seeing a stranger. The Crystal she knew, the little sister she had alternately ignored and patronized, had never existed, not really. I'll find a hotel for tonight. You can't leave now. The guest room is already prepared, my father added hastily. I wouldn't put anyone in that garage, I said firmly. Not even for one night. Harold returned, slipping his phone into his pocket. That was the board chairman. They've called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. He looked at me with new respect in his eyes. Your team works Efficiency has always been a priority at Nexitech, I replied. The dynamics in the room had shifted completely. My family stood awkwardly in their own kitchen, suddenly unsure of their place. The power balance that had defined our relationships for decades had been upended in the span of 15 minutes. I need some air, Veronica said abruptly, heading for the back door. After a moment's hesitation, I followed her. The back porch was covered in a thin layer of fresh snow, glittering under the porch light. Veronica stood at the railing, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Are you really going to keep me on?" she asked without turning around. "Or was that just for show in front of everyone?" "I meant what I said," I told her, joining her at the railing. "Your work is good, Veronica. Our personal history doesn't change that." She nodded slowly, still not looking at me. "I've been horrible to you." "Yes," I agreed simply, "you have. And now you're my boss." She laughed, a short, humorless sound. God, the irony. Life is full of unexpected twists. Finally, she turned to face me. "Why didn't you tell me? Why let me make such a fool of myself?" I considered her question carefully, searching for the honest answer. At first, it was self-preservation. The company was growing but still vulnerable. Then it became habit. And maybe part of me was waiting. Waiting for what? For one of you to see me, I admitted. To be interested in my life without knowing what I had accomplished. To value me for me, not for my success. Tears welled in Veronica's eyes, something I couldn't remember seeing since we were children. "I don't think I know how to do that anymore," she whispered. "With anyone." It was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I went back inside to retrieve my overnight bag from the garage, moving past my stunned family members who seemed frozen in place. When I returned to the house, Harold was collecting his belongings from the guest room. "I've called a car service," he told me. "I think it's best if I give your family some space tonight." "You don't have to leave," I said. "I think I do," he countered with a wry smile. "Besides, I have about 100 emails to answer before morning." Apparently, my new boss is quite demanding. For the first time that evening, I felt a genuine smile tug at my lips. "Is that so?" "Her reputation precedes her," he confirmed, then added more seriously. "For what it's worth, you've built something remarkable. The security framework you developed revolutionized the industry. I'm actually looking forward to seeing where you take Apex." With that unexpected vote of confidence, Harold departed, leaving me alone with my family in the revelation's aftermath. The living room had never felt so silent. We sat in our usual places, yet everything had changed. My parents occupied their matching recliners, Ethan perched on the arm of the sofa, and Veronica curled into the corner of the love seat. I sat on the ottoman, all of us separated by more than just physical space. "So, my father finally broke the silence. A tech empire." It wasn't quite a question, but I nodded anyway. "Yes. And you've been running this company all this time while we thought." My mother trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "While you thought I was failing," I finished for her. "Yes." Veronica stared at her hands. "Why keep it a secret for so long? Why not just tell us?" The question seemed simple, but the answer was complicated, layered with years of hurt and disappointment. At first, it was because I needed to prove it to myself, I explained. I didn't want to announce big plans only to fail. Then, as the company grew, I realized something. You had never shown interest in my work before, so why would money change that? What I wanted wasn't your approval of my bank account. I wanted you to believe in me, in my vision. "We always believed in you," my mother protested weakly. "No," I said firmly, but without anger. "You believed in a version of me that never existed, the daughter who would follow Veronica's path. When I chose differently, your belief vanished." My father shifted uncomfortably. "We were concerned about your future. That's what parents do." "There's a difference between concern and dismissal," I pointed out. "You never once asked me to explain my business model or my goals. You just assumed I was playing at being an entrepreneur." Ethan cleared his throat. "I remember when you tried to tell us about your first round of funding. Mom interrupted you to ask Veronica about her new car." My mother flushed. "I don't remember that." "I do," Veronica said quietly. I remember thinking it was fine because whatever Crystal was doing couldn't be as important as my promotion. The admission hung in the air between us. In all our years of rivalry, Veronica had never acknowledged her role in diminishing me. What does Nexitech actually do? Ethan asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Besides owning Apex now. For the first time that evening I felt a spark of hope. Here was a real question about my work, not my wealth. We started with advanced cloud security, I explained. The security protocols I developed became the industry standard within 2 years. From there, we expanded into integrated systems management, data protection, and eventually artificial intelligence applications for enterprise. Ethan nodded, processing this information. That's why Apex was a strategic acquisition. Their hardware complements your software ecosystem. Exactly, I confirmed, impressed by his quick understanding. And you did all this without a college degree? My father said, his tone unreadable. The skills I needed I taught myself, I said. The rest I hired people who knew more than me. That's what good CEOs do. My mother stood suddenly, disappearing into the kitchen. When she returned, she carried a magazine that had been buried under a stack of mail. The cover featured a silhouette with the headline, Nexitech's mysterious founder. Tech's most influential invisible leader. This came with Richard's business journal last month, she said, her voice tight. I never connected it to you. I never even read the article. The irony wasn't lost on me. Evidence of my success had literally been sitting on their coffee table, unread and unnoticed. Does this mean you're rich? My father asked awkwardly. Yes, I answered simply. Very. Veronica made a sound between a laugh and a sob. All those times I offered to help you financially, to get you back on your feet. God, you must have been laughing at me. I wasn't laughing, I assured her. It was painful, actually, to be seen as someone who needed saving when I was building something I was proud of. Are you going to fire me? She asked again, voicing the fear that had clearly been consuming her. I already told you no, I reminded her. Your position is secure, though your reporting structure will change. She nodded, relief washing over her face. I don't deserve that kindness from you. It's not kindness, I corrected her. It's business. You're good at what you do, whatever our personal history. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I don't know what to say, Crystal. We've been wrong about you, completely wrong. It was perhaps the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from him. I kept the truth from you, I acknowledged. That's on me. But we gave you a reason to, my mother said softly. We made you feel like you had to hide your success instead of share it. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room again. Years of familial patterns don't dissolve in a single evening, no matter how revelatory. Where do we go from here? Ethan finally asked, the practical one as always. It was the question hanging over all of us. How do you rebuild relationships based on fundamental misconceptions? How do you move forward when the past has been rewritten so completely? I don't know, I admitted. This isn't how I plan to tell you. I'm still processing it myself. Will you stay tonight? My mother asked, an edge of desperation in her voice. Not in the garage, obviously. The guest room is yours. The thought of staying, of trying to sleep under this roof with all these emotions swirling, was overwhelming. But the alternative, driving away on Christmas Eve, felt equally wrong. I'll stay, I decided. But I have calls to make first. The announcement has gone out to the executive team, and there will be questions. My father nodded, a new respect in his eyes. Of course. The simple acknowledgement of my responsibilities, something I had never received from him before, felt strangely validating. As I stood to retrieve my laptop from the garage, Veronica rose as well. I'll help you move your things to the guest room, she offered, an olive branch in the form of a simple courtesy. Together we walked to the garage in silence. You thought it would be funny to make me sleep in a freezing garage on Christmas Eve? I asked, raising an eyebrow. It sounds cruel when you say it like that. Because it was cruel, I said simply. Whether I was a struggling entrepreneur or a billionaire CEO, it was unkind. Maybe that's where we start, I suggested, gathering my overnight bag. By not competing, by just being sisters. The message brought a smile to my face. At least professionally, the transition was proceeding smoothly. My mother had prepared the guest room with fresh towels and had turned down the bed, a peace offering in household chores. My father had built a fire in the fireplace, the home warming as if an apology for the coldness it had shown me earlier. 5 years of hiding ended in a moment. But tonight, in this quiet moment, I allowed myself to feel something unexpected. Relief. The weight of deception had been lifted. Across the hall I could hear Veronica on the phone, presumably with colleagues at Apex, her voice hushed but urgent. Down the hall, my parents' low voices filtered through their door, no doubt discussing the stranger their middle child had turned out to be. We were still a fractured family, but for the first time in years we were seeing each other clearly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't even understanding. But it was a beginning. Christmas morning dawned with awkward uncertainty hanging in the air like the scent of brewing coffee. I rose early, accustomed to starting my day before sunrise, and found my father already in the kitchen, staring into his mug as if it contained answers. "Merry Christmas," I offered tentatively. He looked up startled. "Coffee? Please." He poured me a cup with unusual care, as if serving an important guest rather than his daughter. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I would have in the garage," I replied, unable to resist the small jab. "I want you to know I didn't realize how cold it was out there. The formal announcement goes to all Apex employees at 9. No, it's fine. I'm used to working anywhere." He watched me with newfound curiosity as I set up my laptop at the kitchen table, the same place where I had done homework as a child. By 8:30, the rest of the family had trickled into the kitchen. My mother fussed over breakfast with extra attention, producing elaborate French toast and fresh fruit. Veronica checked her phone compulsively, awaiting the official announcement. Ethan observed us all with the careful neutrality of someone watching a delicate negotiation. "Should we do presents now or after breakfast?" my mother asked, trying to establish some normalcy. "After is fine," I said, closing my laptop as 9 o'clock approached. She read it silently, her expression unreadable, then looked up at me. "Nexitech Solutions has acquired Apex Industries. Effective immediately." My parents exchanged glances, the reality of my position sinking in anew. "You kept our family name." Something flickered across his face, something that might have been pride. Breakfast passed with stilted conversation, everyone carefully navigating our new reality. "You brought presents?" my mother asked, surprised. "Of course," I replied. "It's Christmas." For Ethan, a high-end watch he had coveted. Their faces registered shock as they opened these thoughtful items, evidence that despite their inattention to my life, I had been paying attention to theirs. This must have been nearly impossible to find. "You talked about that stationery shop for weeks," I reminded her. "Your father went to the 24-hour pharmacy this morning." Inside was a silver frame containing a printout of the magazine article about Nexitech. "We thought maybe you could sign it," my father said awkwardly, "since you're the mysterious CEO." It was a clumsy gesture, but it was the first true acknowledgement of my professional identity they had ever offered. "Thank you." As the morning progressed, my parents began asking real questions about Nexitech. "So all those times you were on your laptop during holidays, you were actually running a billion-dollar company?" Ethan asked, incredulous. "Pretty much," I confirmed. "Last Thanksgiving, I was finalizing a major acquisition while you all thought I was playing games." "Yes," I admitted. A heavy silence fell over the room. "I found some old photos," she said, retrieving an album. She opened to a page showing me with my high school coding club, proudly displaying a project that had won a regional competition my family had declined to attend. We didn't go because Veronica had a volleyball tournament the same weekend. "It's fine," I said automatically. "No, it's not fine," my father interjected. "We should have been there." By late afternoon, I showed Veronica a text from Harold confirming the company-wide announcement had gone smoothly. "Except that my little sister is now the big boss," she said with a wry smile, the first genuine one I'd seen from her in years. "There is that," I acknowledged. For a brief moment, I glimpsed a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than competition. After dinner, my father asked the question that had been on his mind all day. I needed to know if you could ever see me for who I am, not what I've achieved, I answered honestly. Yes, I confirmed. Until yesterday you did. And now? Ethan asked. What happens with us now? I looked around at their faces, so familiar yet so new. Now, I said, we start again. 2 years later, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, the lights of Boston glittering below. My father, now retired, had become my biggest champion, reading every article and emailing me his thoughts on market trends. Ethan had launched his financial consultancy, with Nexitech as his first client, and we spoke almost daily, our bond forged in the shared language of entrepreneurship. She had earned it, not through nepotism, but through talent and a newfound humility that had transformed her into an incredible leader. Happy birthday, boss, she said, bumping her shoulder against mine. Happy birthday, sis, I replied, clinking my glass against hers. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights. You know, she said, Mom and Dad turned your old room into a guest suite. I laughed. A definite upgrade from the garage. She was right. My greatest success wasn't the company I built, but the family I had finally found. Turns out that sometimes you have to tear everything down to build it back stronger. This story is a reminder that your worth is never defined by someone else's opinion. Share your own stories in the comments below. I'd love to read them.